Hello, Michigan Realtors, and welcome back to another installment of Letter of the Law. Thank you for all your great feedback on last month's episode. Today's topic draws from a variety of suggestions that have been coming in from viewers. It is appropriately titled, Pick Me, because that's a good description of how most buyers have been feeling over the last several months. It's not an easy time to be a buyer. The demand for housing is high, and the supply of housing stock is low. Multiple offer scenarios are the norm, and many buyers' agents are trying to come up with creative ways to increase the chances that their client's offer will be the chosen one. In this segment of Letter of the Law, we'll explore some of these new creative methods that buyers are using to make their offers more attractive, as well as alternatives that buyers can use to keep their offers competitive while also reducing legal risk. One method we're seeing, and arguably one of the most worrisome, is where a buyer waives their inspection contingency clause. The risk in doing so is obvious. A buyer who waives an inspection contingency may end up with a home that needs costly repairs. In this situation, the buyer's chances of recovering against the seller may be slim. Now, over the years, Michigan courts have thrown out a number of cases against sellers on the theory that had the buyer bothered to get a home inspection, the defect would have been discovered. A buyer who cannot recover against the seller may turn their attention to their buyer's agent. For this reason, it's very important that a buyer's agent is able to show that their buyer client knowingly assumed the risks if that buyer chooses to waive the inspection contingency. Now, as an alternative to waiving an inspection contingency completely in order to make their offer more attractive to the seller, buyers may wish to limit their inspection in some other way. For example, the buyer could forego their right to request concessions based upon the results of the inspection. That language might look something like this. Buyer's offer is contingent upon a satisfactory inspection at buyer's expense within X amount of days. Upon receipt of the inspection, buyer shall have the following two options only. A, terminate this agreement in writing, or B, proceed to close pursuant to the terms hereof. Failure to terminate this agreement in writing within the stated time frame shall constitute a waiver of this contingency. The buyer could also agree to limit their right to terminate the agreement only to situations where there is a major property defect. That language might look something like this. Buyer's offer is contingent upon a satisfactory inspection at buyer's expense within X amount of days, provided, however, that the buyer may not terminate this agreement based on the results of the inspection unless it reveals a single defect, the estimated repair cost for which is in excess of X amount of dollars. Or another option. The buyer could agree to forfeit their earnest money deposit if they find the inspection results unsatisfactory. Now that language might look something like this. Buyer's offer is contingent upon a satisfactory inspection at buyer's expense within X amount of days. If the inspection reports are not satisfactory, buyer may terminate this agreement by providing written notice to the seller within said time frame, in which case the earnest money deposit shall be released to seller and neither party shall have any future rights or obligation hereunder. Another worrisome and increasingly common method of making a buyer's offer more desirable is to provide the seller with an appraisal guarantee. Now, this is where the buyer agrees to cover some or all of the shortfall between the contract price and the appraised value of the home. Now, there is nothing inherently wrong with using an appraisal guarantee, although based on the calls we've been getting, it's often the case that these clauses are not drafted very carefully. Furthermore, it's very difficult to draft a one-size-fits-all appraisal guarantee that works with all purchase agreements. Many purchase agreement forms don't actually contain an appraisal contingency clause. With these forms, the only way the results of an appraisal can stop the transaction is if it prevents the satisfaction of a financing contingency. For this reason, it may be necessary to add appraisal contingency language in order to provide for an appraisal guarantee. Now that language might look something like this. Notwithstanding any other provisions herein, this agreement is contingent upon the property being appraised at a value equal to or higher than, and then you would select one of the following: the sale price or a specific amount lower appraised value that the buyer selects. Now, by choosing the second option, the buyer is agreeing to purchase the property if it appraises at some amount lower than the purchase price. The buyer would need to come up with the cash to make up the difference between the purchase price and the lower appraised value. This cash payment amount would be in addition to whatever down payment the buyer has already agreed to pay. Now, as an aside, there appears to be a misconception out there that if the difference between the appraised value of the home and the sale price exceeds the appraisal guarantee amount, then the seller is required to sell at the lower price. This would not be the case unless the purchase contract expressly provides for such a price reduction. Ordinarily, under these circumstances, the buyer's only recourse would be to terminate the agreement or agree to pay the difference. Offering a bonus to the listing agent is another troubling trend. Some buyer's agents have proposed offering the listing agent some kind of bonus for prioritizing their client's offer. Now, this practice could create a problem for both the listing agent and the buyer's agent. First, it is very likely a breach of fiduciary duty for a listing agent to try to encourage a seller client to accept a particular offer because it would result in a benefit to the listing agent. Moreover, under the Code of Ethics, a listing realtor has an ethical obligation to present all offers objectively. And finally, the Occupational Code prohibits a salesperson from accepting a commission from anyone other than his or her own broker. Now, instead of offering a bonus to the listing agent, the buyer's agent could enhance his or her client's offer by offering a commission rebate to the seller. The Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs takes the position that payment by a licensee directly to a buyer or seller is not an illegal referral fee. Some buyers have tried to get the seller's attention by offering a sizable non-refundable earnest money deposit. Now, this is certainly permissible, but keep in mind that if the purchase agreement simply says that the earnest money deposit is non-refundable, the assumption is that it is non-refundable in all instances. So, for example, if the buyers can't get financing or if the inspection contingency is not satisfied, the buyers can get out of the transaction, but they will forfeit the deposit. If a buyer does not intend that the deposit be non-refundable in all instances, then that needs to be spelled out in the purchase agreement. When considering a non-refundable deposit, remember also that currently courts tend to enforce time deadlines in contracts quite strictly. So if a buyer agrees to a sizable non-refundable deposit and for some reason the loan process is delayed beyond the agreed upon closing date, the seller may try to declare the purchase agreement terminated and the deposit forfeited. After all, in this market, the seller is not likely to have any trouble selling the home to someone else. We have also heard of buyers who have become so discouraged that they decide to put in offers on more than one home at a time. Again, the risk is obvious. These buyers may find themselves contractually obligated to buy more than one home. In today's market, buyers may assume that if the worst happens and they end up with purchase contracts on two different homes, they will be able to quickly resell one of those homes. But if not, remember that the damages for breach of contract are typically the difference between the actual value of the home and the agreed upon price, which in today's market could be significant. A simpler approach to making an offer more desirable to a seller may be for the buyer to offer to assume some of the seller's closing costs. Just as a seller may agree to pay all or some of the buyer's closing costs, a buyer may agree to pay some or all of the seller's closing costs. For example, a buyer wishing to prepare an offer that stands out from other offers could agree to pay some or all of the seller's listing commission obligation, state and local transfer taxes, and or the owner's title insurance policy. In this competitive market, it's understandable why some buyers might be willing to undertake extreme measures to get their offers noticed by sellers. That being said, buyers should be well educated on the risks associated with using any of the methods mentioned in today's segment. To assist realtors in guiding buyers through this process, we've created an acknowledgement and release form that supervisory brokers may wish to adopt. The form is intended to 1. Inform your clients of the risks involved in using some of these methods of making their offers more attractive, and 2. Establish a written record of your clients' decisions. Realtors can find this form on the Michigan Realtors Legal Resource page. As always, if you have any questions or you would like to suggest a future topic for Letter of the Law, please send me an email to the address listed below. Thanks for tuning in, and good luck out there.